I was very impressed with what you said, and I kind of live by everything what you said. But there's one thing, and you said the worst is not to get enough sleep. But when you get older, and I'm 80 years old, so I'm kind of don't sleep. I do everything right, but I don't sleep. I sleep 3 hours. I wake up for 4 hours, back to 2 hours. My husband is in the same boat. How do I get to sleep when I know
I'm having trouble.
the sleep? How do I get to the sleep if I can't sleep? When you get older, you don't sleep that good anymore.
Right. So that's a good point. How do you promote better sleep? You have to train yourself to sleep. All right. And so and really it can be done. So a lot of the problem when people are older is their schedule is dysregulated compared to the way it used to be. You don't have the same kind of need to adhere to a schedule. So one thing is to not take naps during the day. Another thing is to exercise. Exercise in insomniacs adds an hour onto their sleep within just a few weeks, okay? So more vigorous exercise. Limiting the time in bed and then gradually expanding it. I mean, it's more than I can explain right now, but the bottom line is there are strategies so that you get to the place where you have more hours of uninterrupted sleep. And we do this with insomniacs, and it works for older people and the whole 9 yards too. But it's something you definitely want to look into fixing because it will get worse with time if you don't turn it around. Yeah, so I couldn't hear that, but yeah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation and learned so much. If I can add something, I'm a yoga teacher, and traditional yoga, not the hot yoga, not the yoga with the goats and yoga with beer, but traditional yoga is very, very good. The asanas are across the midline of the body and spinal twisting, and there's a lot of brain exercises that have been recently added to yoga practice.
Yeah,
so that may take you to 110 or 115.
Well, you'll be happy to hear I have a yoga studio in my building, and I own it. So, yoga is very available to me.
Hi, I love your book. I'm reading it right now, Food Over Medicine. And my question is, how do you feel about the flu shot and also the 2 pneumonia vaccines?
Well, I don't feel about anything. I think what we want to ask is what does the evidence show about those? The flu shot is useless. I mean, every study that's ever been done has shown it's useless. And before the drug companies made their immunity deal with the feds, the massive immunization program was launched 4 times and pulled off the market because of the increased incidence of Guillain-Barré in almost every state. A lot of people died, a lot of people ended up disabled. But once the immunity deal was in place, and in case you don't know what I'm talking about, and I'll answer the pneumonia vaccine question this way. This is a touchy subject, and Steve might be apoplectic in the back that I'm going into it, but I'm going to do it anyway because I've got the mic. But anyway, okay. But here's the thing. Sometimes a situation is so corrupt that you basically have to say, until we fix that, we're going to stop this. All right? And here's what I'm talking about. The vaccine makers were being sued a lot many, many years ago. And they went to the government and said, we're going to stop making and selling these vaccines unless you give us immunity against any financial damages from our products, which they did. So the feds entered into this agreement. You can't sue the vaccine makers. They can hurt and kill as many people as they want. They have no financial liability. There's a tax on every vaccine. It goes into a fund, and the federal government administers this fund. Most people don't know that they're supposed to file a claim, and most people don't know you have to have the batch number and all kinds of information nobody gets. So in spite of the fact that it's kind of a secret court that nobody knows about, it's paid out $4.5 billion since it was instituted. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's say that the car makers in the United States go to the government and say, you know what, these safety standards are killing us, man. Okay, all right, so you either hold us harmless for any damage done by our cars, we're going to go make them in Mexico again. So the federal government sets up a program and says, we're not going to have any safety standards anymore. We're going to collect a $250 tax on every car. It goes into a fund. So if I kill somebody, with my car because the brakes don't work, that family files a lawsuit or they file a claim with the court and so on. How many of you would buy a car made in the United States? That's what I thought. So we have to clean that up. We got to get rid of that, all right, and make these people responsible because this is despicable. And it goes to the kind of corruption that goes on in government where we don't have regulators anymore. We have business partners that we call the FDA. The USDA is a business partner. The NIH is a business partner. And we have no business having these government-funded, well, actually, they're not government-funded, partially. The FDA will receive $1.1 billion in user fees from the drug companies this year. Okay? The approval rate for drugs is 96%. Wouldn't you love to see the 4% they're turning down? It must be like intravenous arsenic. And there's a conversation in the hallway, submit it next year, we got to look like we're paying attention, but we'll slide it on through. And it's just despicable. So.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I didn't hear you talk about chia or flax seeds. What's your opinion?
I think they're great. I mean, I have a tablespoon of flax in my smoothie every day, but they're not magical foods. There's no magical food. Pardon me? Well, they're good for omega-3 and for fiber. A tablespoon of flax seeds has 3 grams of fiber and a lot of mucilage, so if people are constipated, it can help. So if you like them, eat them. If you don't like them, it doesn't make any difference.
What's your opinion about fat-free cheese?
Dairy cheese?
Yeah, fat-free dairy cheese.
Yeah, you still got all that estrogen in there, though. Yeah, the problem with dairy isn't the fat. I mean, that's just a tiny part of the problem. The problem with dairy is that dairy products and milk products contain estrogen and estrogen metabolites. And so one of the leading causes of breast cancer, they're mostly estrogen receptor positive. Ovarian cancer is estrogen receptor positive. So why would you want to eat estrogen? And then you've got casein and dairy proteins that increase the risk of cancer, very powerful cancer promoters. So I think it's best to ditch the dairy.
Hi. They
Hi.
really did a good job of covering up the CDC with all of the whistleblowing that went on like 3 years ago. And I think that's where that fund in that instance originated. Is that true?
What's that now?
The cover-up that they had where CDC was responsible for sending out a defective batch of vaccines, and
Well, that's just a tiny piece of it. The CDC I'll tell you, you're talking about the flu vaccine, and I think it was 2009, remember H1N1 when that happened? All right, so we were having an epidemic, okay, just like right now, if you notice, we're having an epidemic of the coronavirus because there are 1.7 billion people in China and 500 people have it. I'm scared. And then I think we have 5 people in the United States. I almost didn't come here because I was going to wear like some kind of spacesuit on the airplane, So definitely frightening. But they gin up all this concern. So anyway, the H1N1 thing, the bottom line is that supposedly there were so many people showing up with this H1N1 flu, they said, we don't have any time to test. You just treat anybody who shows up with respiratory symptoms as if they've got this flu. Well, CBS News, I wrote about this. You can go back and look in my library and see the date posted. I said, this is all ginned up, it's made up, you'll find out later it never happened. CBS News did an investigatory study on this, or reporting on this, and they sent, under the Freedom of Information Act, they made the states cough up the data, the individual health departments. There was no epidemic. What had happened is the feds had bought 93 million doses of this flu vaccine, and they desperately needed people to get vaccinated. So the reason why they said don't report is because the reporting was disastrous. So they make this stuff up. They literally invent things, and the thing that's so frustrating is if I did it, I'd be in prison. They do it, and they get rewarded for it. It's disgusting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have a question about MRIs.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I go for an MRI and I get the contrast, which I need to do 3 times a year, the contrast promotes memory loss. Like I have short-term memory loss. Is there a way to combat that?
Yes, possibly. But the first thing that I would look at is the necessity of the MRI. We don't want to get into that right now, but Excuse me. I know. Like I said, we would want to look at the necessity of the MRI because if you look at the data, you may make a different decision about it. So when we talk about looking at the data, long-term outcomes is the benefit I'm going to get with the risk I'm going to be taking. And if you haven't looked at that data, you should look at that data. Okay? And I can't see where somebody is, so just start talking. I'll follow the voice.
So here's two
I see
quick
you.
questions, actually.
Uh-huh.
On the coffee, decaf coffee, is that the same as caffeinated coffee?
No, absolutely not.
And so I've also read a number of studies that say that for brain health, DHA is very important, as well as intermittent fasting, and you didn't mention either one of those. I'm just curious what your thought is.
I'll talk about both of those things, starting with DHA. Every study that's ever been done on these omega-3 supplements shows that they're useless. So the drug companies said, they're useless, so we're going to come up with a prescription version of it, Visipa. You're starting to see it advertised on TV. I think it's, trying to think, I think it might be an AstraZeneca product. Anyway, Visipa is useless. It reduces the risk of bad things happening by like 0.9%, and it increases the risk of death and everything else. So the prescription version of it is useless. And it is so useless that 2 other drug companies that had a drug, and after Visipa was approved, you got to imagine it's going to be a shoo-in for the other 2 companies to get theirs approved. In a rare moment of ethical lapse, they withdrew the drugs from consideration, the omega drugs from consideration. So even a pharmaceutical version of it doesn't work. Now, one of the things that you hear all the time is vegans have lower levels of DHA than non-vegans. You're right. But the question is, does that matter? Vegans are leaner than non-vegans. Vegans have higher metabolites of certain vegetables in their urine than non-vegans. In other words, you can't take everything that's different about a plant eater or a vegan and assume that it's pathology. Show me a study showing that people who eat a vegan diet over a long period of time have some type of mental impairment or something that results from this lower level of DHA, and there is no such research. So what's happened is people are taking observations and then turning them into something more than an observation. Observations are important, by the way, but you just can't infer too much from them. Now, the intermittent fasting thing I'll talk about for just a second. I read the book and I was very disappointed. There's one chapter worth reading, and it's the one on cancer. The rest of it's nonsense. I looked up the studies and they're garbage, absolute garbage. I was very disappointed in that. The problem with intermittent fasting, and some of you have been here before and heard me talk about this, is it makes an already difficult transition harder for no proven advantage. In other words, we don't have a single study that shows that people who do intermittent fasting daily are better off than people who eat optimally over a 10, 20, 30-year period of time. So this is all hypothesizing. And the problem is we have enough trouble getting people to sustain this. In other words, this isn't about doing something right for 2 weeks. This is about doing a lot of things right for 25 years. So I've always said, you know, I teach some accountant today in the office how to intermittent fast. This Friday's his mother's birthday party, and he sits there and drinks water while everybody else has dinner, and intermittent fast, the whole thing's out the window. This is not, and plus, when you exhibit this kind of strange behavior in front of your family and friends, they think you got abducted at the airport over the weekend and brainwashed and turned loose outside the restaurant for dinner. You know, this is just not helpful, all right? So we get these people that are intermittent fasters. They're trying to eat all their calories in 2 meals. They're nauseous and bloated and throwing up, and they go, "Thank God I can stop this." I mean, you know. So I think it's a good idea to potentiate chemotherapy or for some specific purpose, but as a generalized way of living, it's nonsense in my opinion. Okay, I can't hear you. I need somebody with a mic. Okay, yes.
You showed a slide about China and the increase in diabetes. I'm a planning member of Citizens for 5G Awareness. And as a kid, my grandparents were old. I don't remember such a diagnosis as Alzheimer's, and certainly not in the rates that we're seeing it in younger people today. And I'm wondering if that increase in diabetes, because we do know that radiation, non-ionizing radiation in Hispanic women increases their risk of diabetes. So is this possibly as much diet-related as it is cell phone non-ionizing radiation?
It's the food.
You're saying unequivocally it has nothing to do with...
I'm saying unequivocally it has nothing to do with it. And the reason I say that...
That's not true.
Well,
Sorry,
we can have a discussion about it, but what you have to show me is studies that have isolated that as a factor. Show me perfect eaters who are getting enough sleep and exercising and got everything right, and cell phone usage or radiation being a factor, and there isn't any such research. And furthermore, a lot of the research that's been done on cell phones and that sort of thing has been from self-reported data, which is very terrible data. And so an example of how terrible it can be, one research group got this crazy idea to verify the information. So in one study, The people have been asked, how much do you use your cell phone, more right ear, left ear, whatever. Well, they could never verify left ear, right ear, but they did get their cell phone data from the cell phone companies, and people wildly exaggerated how much they were using their cell phones. I mean, it was off by thousands of minutes. I mean, they have no idea how much they're talking. So the problem is the way that the data have been collected and the fact that there has been no research that has confounded for the diets and that sort of thing. So if you go to China, and I own a business there, so I know a little bit about this, you still have this dividing line between people still eating a traditional diet in some areas of the country, and there isn't any diabetes there, and people in the major cities who are eating, and they have cell phones, by the way. There's very few areas of China where there isn't a cell phone or a cell tower, and people eating the American diet. The American diet, the Western diet, is romanticized by developing countries, which I'm not sure we could even categorize China as that right now, but it's romanticized. They can't wait to start eating Haagen-Dazs ice cream and fried chicken and all the stuff that we eat. And that's exactly when you see these diseases start to take off. And if you take a look at data like McDougall's data, Esselstyn's data, these are people that have been doing this for 30 and 40 years. Ornish's data, the CHIP program, they've had people from all these different nationalities and ethnicities and the whole 9 yards, and when they change the diet, these things go away, and there has been no difference in the outcomes since the advent of cell phones and that sort of thing. So I think there's an overwhelming amount of data that says I'm right, but I'm willing to change my mind if you show me the data I'm looking for. Well, show me the data. I'm a data girl, and nothing else matters to me but data. Very boring person I am. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Popper, I've been a follower and a fan, and I also love your candor. Thank you very much for what you do. Just on what you said about intermittent fasting, are you including in that the work of Dr. Walter Longo? And
That's the book I was referring to.
Okay, because was that not based on Nobel Prize winning research?
No.
That was my understanding.
Well, not most of the book wasn't. And most of it, he makes statements in that book that just blow your mind. If he was from Okinawa, he would eat more purple potatoes, but he's from Italy, so he's eating asparagus. I mean, as the book went on, and I read it with very high hopes. I used it as an advanced study book for one of my classes, because I pick books every month that my group studies together. And we had very high hopes for that book. And the one chapter on potentiating cancer treatment was good. The rest of it, the citations were terrible. And this guy's supposedly an academic. So I'm sorry to say what I have to say, because I really expected to say different things about it. But
Dr. Kahn is a huge promoter of Walter Longo's work.
well, I hope that the actual reading of it went on, and
Thank
it would be hard to misinterpret the citations because they were nonsense. I mean, we're talking about rat studies with some isolated substance from something. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. So, anyway, maybe we have time for two or three more?
Right behind.
Okay. There. All right.
Every once in a while, I find myself in a discussion with someone that's promoting either the carnivorous diet or the keto or paleo or whatnot. One of the things they like to claim is the nutrient density of things like liver. So are there certain things in those that you can't find so much in a whole food plant-based diet?
No.
Some of the nutrients?
No. And you know what? My favorite line, because believe it or not, people are always trying to give me health advice because I clearly need it. Things are not going so well for me, as you can see. So, but one of the things I say, and we train our members to say this too, you're really enthusiastic about this, and as you know, I'm really into health. So please give me the studies that you've accumulated showing that eating liver is good for your health. I mean, long-term stuff where they followed people for 10, 20 years. I'd like to take a look at that, and I promise I'll read it, and we'll meet for coffee and talk about it. Guess how many people come up with the studies? 0, all right? And after a while, they stop suggesting this nonsense. It's a really great way to get them off your back. When you ask for the evidence, it just puts everything to rest. So.
Thank you, doctor. That's going to be the last question. The doctor will be available outside to take your questions. And I think most of you know the routine. We're going to be in the back. One person at a time, please. Thank you.